We're here with another episode of Bridging Black Love. I'm Dr. Jacqueline.
I'm Misha, and today we will be talking about boundaries in a relationship. How do you establish boundaries? How do you deal with the lack of boundaries in a relationship?
That is a word right there. That's a great topic.
I will start us off by saying that that is an area of growth for me. I have had a hard time with approaching the conversation just initially so that it's proactive versus reactive, and then dealing with boundaries once they're crossed.
Okay. And I think for myself in relationships, I don't think I fully delineate boundaries in the beginning.
Mm.
It's hard for me. There's certain things that I set boundaries about. I set boundaries about my children. People know off the
Mm.
bat what I'm going to deal with my children. They come, they're forefront in everything that I do. But I have a hard time setting boundaries with my family. I have a hard time
Mm.
setting boundaries with work. And so
Mm.
these are some of the things that I do. And then social settings, like me going out of town. Some people don't understand what that means to me to be able to go out of town with my friends. So
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and I would say for me, I think everyone kind of knows based on my personality. I'm no nonsense about my kids. I'm no nonsense about people being judgmental. There's this certain, I have a look, and there's this thing about me that makes certain things off limits, but it's when I'm in that intimate relationship, and it's kind of like there are things that I don't necessarily care for, or I don't find to be respectful for a relationship. And it's having those initial conversations of like kind of negotiating the what we will and won't do, what his or my definition of disrespect to the relationship. And so it's those little nuances that I think I kind of struggle with, because sometimes I feel like I'm very different from many people in some realms. Like loyalty is like, I have this big thing about loyalty, and some of the things that I feel are like a disregard to loyalty, someone else may not feel is a disregard to so it's kind of like negotiating that conversation, because obviously I'm not going to be the only one comfortable in a relationship, and the other person obviously can't just have their way either. So it's just kind of figuring out like what's good, what are we both comfortable with as far as boundaries are concerned.
yeah, that's good. Um, yeah, I think like, just even listening to what you're saying, for myself, yeah, I have deal breakers. But and most of my boundaries, I feel like come with, um, people like how I present myself on Facebook. That's boundaries for some people. Like
Mm.
what is too much to share, what's not enough to share, and things like that. And then traveling is an area of contention for the people that I date. They know that I like to date. I mean, they love them. They know that I like to travel. Excuse me. Not that
Right.
I love to date, but that I love to travel. And people have a hard time. And I really have to set those boundaries that, this is the person that I was before I met you. And sometimes I really have to compromise. I feel like maybe I'm not compromising with my boundaries. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm learning that um, boundaries are no good if they're not going to be communicated. So if I'm going to wait until a deal breaker is hit, then what's the point? Like there's that other person is not involved at all with what those boundaries are. And I don't think it's fair for somebody to know that they disrespected the boundary after they're terminated. Like
That's
you're terminated for violating a boundary you didn't know about.
mhm,
Now be on your way now.
right. And that's very true. And as far as loyalty in a relationship, I think I set that precedence pretty early, is that, this
Uh,
is what I would like as far as, loyalty. And the people that I've dated seriously in my life, they have most of the people have set boundaries with me about like some of the male friends that I have. Like, these are the things that
mhm,
that this is not what I find appropriate. And
mhm.
so that's that. But I need to, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I need to work on my boundaries. What's my
Mm.
clear boundary with people?
Yeah. So I think when I think about it, I've kind of oversimplified it, but then I haven't communicated it. I haven't done a good job at communicating it. So to me, my boundaries are, if I can't bring you to an event with this said male friend,
Mm-hmm.
um, then that's not a friendship. That's something that's potentially disrespectful to the relationship, because there's a reason why I don't feel safe or comfortable with you being privy to that friendship. So if you can't come over, and if I can invite that friend over for a barbecue, if I couldn't or wouldn't invite that friend to our wedding, if we couldn't hang out with that friend and his significant other, that's not a friend. That's somebody that's potentially disrespectful to the relationship. And so it's not that I don't like that I disassociate with them, because they may be my Facebook friend, they may be my Instagram friend. They're very distant. I won't be, cupcaking on the phone with them late night. I'm not going to be spending time with them that you know nothing about. Probably I'm not even going to be spending time with them at all, because I'd rather avoid a potential situation than have to try to explain one after the fact.
Yeah. And I think I feel you on that. And it's like, with the boundaries as far as like friends, I think it's because it takes so long for me to get into a relationship. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
really like, you always say that you don't like a lot of people. Jackie, what's wrong with you? But once I get into a relationship, I feel like it's like, okay, if this is my person, then we're just gonna
Mm-hmm.
respect this and we're gonna be in this bubble, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, those other things, those other people don't really matter much because I chose this person and that person must be
Mm-hmm.
very special because I chose him. Um, and so for me, I'm like, and then I don't have a lot of male friends anyway, just in
Yeah.
general. Nobody's
Yeah.
really threatened by my female friends. But yeah, and I feel like that's something that I know that I probably need to communicate more. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
those are, like you said, those are things that we need to communicate early on because no one can read our mind. They don't know what our boundaries are. So they don't know if
Mm-hmm.
we decide to ghost them or we no longer want to engage with them because they didn't know our boundaries in the first place.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And I think, for me, we've had this conversation before with the ex collectors.
Mm.
I tend to date people who kind of keep these gray area friendships, or whatever, communicate, open communication, open resource, or whatever, for these, old flames or people they used to date, or exes, or ex fiancés, ex wives, whatever. And usually I don't know, kind of like you, I don't know a boundary is hit until something doesn't feel right. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably not very respectful to the relationship. So like, to me, it's like, it's hard to establish it early because it's not a problem usually until it becomes a problem. So usually when you meet somebody, you're all into each other, you want to spend as much time as possible. You can clearly tell that that person is choosing you. It's when the relationship starts to stabilize a little bit, and things that should have friendships, or exes that should have kind of drifted off a little bit just due to your closeness with your new person, is now not happening. And so now the boundaries are crossed, but they weren't really crossed early because those boundaries weren't there yet, if that makes sense.
That makes complete sense. And
Yeah.
so then I would ask you and our audience. So how is it when you're in that relationship? How do you go about setting those boundaries? Because you didn't set them in the beginning. And I know this is about setting
Mm-hmm.
boundaries in the beginning and things like that, but you didn't know
Right.
what was triggering to you until you're in the relationship. And that is often sometimes that we think, that
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't have to deal with certain things and situations. And we don't know them until we're confronted with them. So
Right.
how do you establish boundaries effectively, safely,
Uh-huh.
kindly in a relationship once you're already in the relationship?
That's a good question. And I have been on the other side where I violated a boundary I didn't know
Mhm.
was a boundary of an ex. He didn't want me, having any kind of communication, such as inboxes and text messages with exes, and definitely anti-flirtatious tone. And whereas I wasn't being flirtatious, I was not shutting down the flirtation as much as I could have been. I just kind of like quietly, passively curved it, but I didn't like shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like the way that I respected that boundary after the fact, because it was something that was brought to me after a line was crossed, was that I heard him, and I made every effort after that to clearly, establish those boundaries with those other people. Like, hey, you can't be calling me sexy chocolate in my inbox, or you can't be referring to me by pet names, even though I'm not doing it in return. I'm clearly not shutting it down. So I think, you approach those, you tell the person you're with that something is bothering you. And I think if they cared enough about you, they want to do what they can to kind of manage your feelings about that, or at least it should start a conversation to negotiate. Hey, I understand that's your boundary, but I'm not willing to totally demolish these relationships, but I will do X, Y, and Z if that makes you more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's not happening in a lot of the relationships.
I agree. Mm-hmm. I agree, because I don't think that I go in with a lot of boundaries, but then there's things that are triggering to me one minute, and then I'm like, well, how can you read my mind and know that this is something that's triggering to me from something that happened when I was 27? You didn't know?
Right. Exactly.
So, these are great questions, and I would love for people to chime in and talk about how they set up boundaries in their relationship, especially when it's new. Especially when it's new, when you like this person, you're vibing with that person, especially as we get older. For me, you don't vibe as well with people as you used to when you were like 25, know? And when you find somebody that you really like, you really want to just be like, oh, I like this person and I don't want to ruin it with, whatever. So.
Right, exactly. So how do you guys establish these relationships, both early, or if you didn't do it early, how do you go about establishing boundaries once lines have been crossed?
We'd love to hear from you guys.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.